get a little more into the, like, for example, this year was the first year that the succession planning, right? What do you do when you want to retire? When had some interesting topics. They changed that around, and this year they introduced things like not so much just succession planning. I'm out, right? But okay, so you break a leg, right? How do you maintain the store while you're in the hospital, right? Who's your key person insurance, things like that I didn't frankly didn't even know existed, right? I mean, there's this thing called a key person insurance where basically if you are out, they will pay your employees, right? So you don't have to worry about it, and they can keep the store running. Does that make sense? So so that's it for me. For me was the seminars and the networking. Those are the two primary things I get out from going year after year after year. I mean, what did you, the first year you went, what did you get out of it, Wayne?
Well, I got an affirmation that I was doing a lot of things right. I went to every seminar I could squeeze in, and the suggestions they were making, the philosophies they were teaching, like the discounting, for example. It's like to not discount. I don't know if that's the same seminar, but how discounting is actually very hard to do, and it's not really the right direction to take your business. You don't want to be the shop that's the cheapest. And it's really, really hard to raise your prices, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I've been a very strong believer in just charging regular price because we're already offering so much value in service and offering a play space and whatnot and being so specialized. And there are other stores that they discount, and they certainly attract a certain kind of customer that all they care about is the lowest price, and they're not as interested in the community. But using space that's too high for product, to decorate it with cool stuff. I already did that. I have a bunch of original magic paintings, one of each color, framed above my my magic stuff. I have a collection of weapons on the wall, sculptures, stuff like that. And so yeah, it really made me feel like I was doing things right. It made me feel more confident. The swag was pretty good. I mean, that was the year they gave out the Fin Fang Foom purple pants for HeroClix. I just recently sold that for over $100 or something. Was the swag any good this year?
So the way they really don't do stuff on the floor that much anymore, and I'm kind of glad of that. All right, so if any of my local customers listening to this, I'm sorry, but it's very annoying when we find you in there because we're just trying to do business, right? And some of these people aren't motivated by the same reasons we are. They're there because they want to talk to the publisher, because they're fanboys, or they're there because, they're giving out free stuff. So a lot of that stuff has gone away from the floor intentionally. Now, what they do is they send you a box later, and you get to find out what's in the box later. So we can't speak yet to the. It is better. Plus, but for you guys traveling too, right? I mean, you don't want to put this in a plane or ship it back, right? So basically, Alliance, which is one of the distributors, ships the boxes out directly. You do a number of seminars, and when you get your punches basically on your card, right? Because you attended these seminars, because the real big focus with this is education, right? They want to drive membership, and in particular, the swag box is there for, and that's not like I can care. I appreciate it, right? But realistically speaking, I don't go there for the box. But it's a way to offset costs for those stores that probably need it the most, right? The ones that are like thinking, hey, can I afford to go? Or maybe not the stores that are in a condition to not go. You know what I mean? If you're that to the point of losing it, you're obviously probably doing something wrong. And, barring other circumstances, you don't have enough staff, or, your health, whatever. The box is there to attract those stores that need it the most, right? If they go, hey, I can get about $1,000 worth of stuff that I can sell for free, then it offsets those costs a little bit.
Yeah.
And like John, this year it was very much the networking was probably bigger than. I think last year I didn't know enough people in the industry, and I'm socially awkward nerd, so I had a hard time just approaching random people. This year I kind of knew a lot more people. There were a lot of repeat seminars, which were less useful this year than they were last year because I've heard it. and a lot of the seminars are aimed more at the newer shops, which is good. And not necessarily, shops that are just 3 weeks old or 1 month old or whatnot, but shops that are in their first few years and they're still trying to get something just above the basics. And since I saw so much of that last year, I stepped up my store to that level since then. So there was less information I pulled out of the seminars this year than I pulled out last year. But I've I've talked with lots of different retailers. I've people that I've known online and talked through Facebook and stuff, and get to meet them in person. And then when we do our smaller private chats and whatnot, we get into more in-depth things. And just being able to get to meet these people and stuff, what we talk about goes beyond where the seminars, picks up where the seminars leave off, especially these other stores that have been here several times. We're all at least to the level that the seminars are at. So then the networking and the meeting people allows me to get even further into it. As well as I have now seen 6 shops out here, and kind of see how different stores do it, kind of get different perspectives. Vegas runs different than Portland. I went to Portland a month ago. I went and looked at all of the shops I could out there, and both areas run differently than Colorado. So seeing different perspectives, there's a synergy that kind of happens between stores that are close to each other in a way. The layout in Vegas, all these stores have all their product along all the walls and the tables in the middle. And Colorado, the back room is the game room, and the walls don't have product on them. And just little things like that change, and you get to see what works and what works better and stuff like that. I also got to meet some of the, John had a group of us here, and I got to meet a lot of the publishers too. And I got to get, a little bit more in depth with these guys that are pushing their stuff, and they know how to sell their stuff. So they're teaching me highlights. They're teaching me, I learned how to do painting better. I learned how to play Drop Zone Commander better, and some stuff I'm going to be able to bring back, and micro scale improvements. I'm going to be able to push this to my customers better. So,
And if I may, Wayne, one thing that has changed significantly, especially this year, the quality of the seminars in general was better, but I think finally we're starting to see just an improvement at the bottom level of the industry, which is, bottom is a negative term, but the very front lines of the industry, which is us, the retailers, right? I saw a lot less trolling, a lot less pitchforking, which is something that really happens. And unfortunately, when you're a publisher and you're in a room and somebody's heckling you, right, because you did something that they didn't want, whatever it was, you kickstarted, or you didn't select them for the regional or whatever. Not, there's a time and place for everything, and the way some of those retailers conducted themselves, in the seminars was frankly embarrassing. That is for the most part gone. So I don't think those, we'll call them trolls. Let's just say these trolls. I don't think they're gone. I think they've evolved. I mean, I genuinely believe that it's working, right? These people are stepping up their game. They're cleaning their stores. They're I make it a point of going with a tie. And this happens. I get a lot of like, hey, you're the best dressed person here, but it's what I'm trying to portray, which is this is a trade show. It's a professional environment, right? So I don't wear a tie at work. I wear my polo, right? But when I go to the trade show, I just step it up a notch. And I'm just happy that this year there wasn't a lot of flip flops and t-shirts with holes in them, right? So I think as an industry we're evolving, and the GAMA trade show is a big part of that, right? It teaches you how other people do stuff, and it teaches you to aspire to a better better store. So in that sense, it's absolutely invaluable, right?
Right. Well, sorry, go ahead.
The other side of that is, I think that especially from things like GAMA, there's a lot less to pitchfork about this year. Last year, Justin Zoran got up in the front of the Whiz Kids Hall, and it was nothing but, hey, look, you guys have got to clean up your act. And instead of doing a presentation on what's coming out, he did a hour-long apology of all the things that we were in arms about, and made a bunch of promises. He listened to us. He made those changes. This year, none of those same issues are still a problem. And I think that that's not, I think that that one's the most extreme example, because over the last year, WizKids has done so much to make the retail store the primary, a partner in their business and the primary way that they're making their money, and showing us that through their actions. But I think that the industry, the retailers have less to complain about, because the publishers and the distributors are listening to us and they're making those changes. And whether it's perfect or not, we see the effort and we see people trying, and we see these companies trying to do a better job.
Well, and we got that from a cool mini or not too, right? So here's what usually packs a room at GTS, right? It's either the pitchforking, which is, hey, I got a beef with this guy, I got to be at this seminar, or it's the high profile stuff like, Asmodee North America, Fantasy Flight Games to the general public, about the new Star Wars releases or things like that. But you can expect those to be fairly bigly attended. And the nice thing was the cool mini or not, and I happen to know one of the guys that's like one of the majority shareholders, right? They're genuinely trying to put in an effort, because the big thing with Cool Mini or not, if you guys are not familiar with them, their company, they fairly heavily uses Kickstarter. It uses Kickstarter for even established games. It's basically one Kickstarter project after the other. But they've listened, right? They're like, look, we get it. This is not a sustainable. This is not something that's benefiting all the tiers of the industry. So we're going to start putting out some games that are direct to the retailers and not Kickstarted. They're taking a gamble on it, right? But they acknowledge that, hey, we've come together and told you it's fine, Kickstart, but then when you come try to sell to us, you've eroded some of that base market, right? So we're a little more hesitant. So I've seen a lot more cooperation, right? And I think it starts with, we're professional in presenting the way things are. Hey, these are problems. We'd like to address them. Instead of going, you guys suck, drop F-bomb here or there and walk out of the room, right? Which has happened before, believe it or not. So I'm glad to see that gone, basically. And also understanding that sometimes the problem that you have may not be able to be resolved, right? I mean, if you want something that's going to radically change the way the company works, and look, there's good marriages and bad marriages, right? If that product doesn't work for you and you want to change that product to a point where it works for you, it may be good for you, but if it may not be good for WizKids or Wizards or whatever, right? I mean, if I go to the VP of sales of Wizards of the Coast and go, look, I think you should do non-collectible format. Okay, you got to get rid of these. He's probably going to laugh at me, right? So, within reason, there's a lot of things that can be done. Wayne, you had something? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, when I did go to the GAMA trade show that one time, I didn't get to experience the networking because I went down to Las Vegas with my girlfriend at the time. And any spare time I had, when my seminars were done, I just went back to her, and we enjoyed Las Vegas as much as we could. So I think I really missed out on the networking. And part of me was feeling, well, I'm all the way from Canada up in Toronto. What's the point of networking with people that aren't close to me or whatever? Like, I understand the value of networking. I just I downplayed it because I didn't have the opportunity. I think if I would go again, I would go myself and spend as much time as possible networking, because I think I missed out on a lot. Could you maybe share some networking successes you've had over the years, like some of your big wins?
Sure. So just this year, for example, two things that I just took away, and these just happened literally. They had nothing. It was, we were loitering in the hall, and we just got to talking. We're going to be changing our incorporation from an LLC to a C corp, because I haven't talked to Gordon. Gordon is the owner of, and forgive me, Gordon, but I don't remember his last name. Anyways, he's also no, he's the owner of the. That's another good source of information and knowledge, by all means. No, Board Game Barrister is...
Lugar?
I believe so. Yeah, I don't know 100% of the spell. But anyways, by by profession, he trained to be a lawyer, right? So he's giving me all the ins and outs of what a C corp is versus an LLC. And it turns out the C corp, while it has a higher taxation rate, it's got a much better protection. There are much more established laws for it, right? And plus, what we're trying to do here is we want to start giving some ownerships to the employees, and it works a lot better as a C corp than it does an LLC. Again, we were just literally just chatting over a cup of coffee, right? And how's your store going? How's this? And he was like, well, I'm about to change to C Corp, why, et cetera, et cetera. The other one was I spent a lot of time with Gary Sproul, I believe is how you say his last name. And he's from the Haunted Games Cafe, which is one of the older board game cafe kind of concepts. And one of the things we're doing this year, we're moving into a larger store. And well, I'm Italian and I love coffee, so we're going to put in, coffee and some extra food. It feels like it's the direction we need to go into. It's even the small little stuff, because I'm thinking, hey, we need a kitchen at least at these dimensions. Like, no, the smaller you make your counter, the kitchen, the better, because you don't want to move around, right? I don't think about these things. I would find out later when I'm using it and I'm going, poop, now I got to take 10 more steps to go get the chocolate syrup, and now I need to take 3 more steps this way to do the right. And these are the kind of things that maybe through Facebook or social media you can kind of catch on, but there's a different sort of synergy. You get so much in such a small amount of time. And to address what you said, Wayne, significant others, right? This is a lot of people come here and do a vacation, and that's great. I think what you will find, what ends up happening is over the years, in your first year, you might just party more than you network, and that's fine, right? This is Vegas. Your second year, you hadn't met a couple of people, and now you're partying with those people, right? So, for example, a whole bunch of people took out one of the pod. Are you guys familiar with what the Ferris wheel we have over here is, right? It's a gigantic Ferris wheel that basically each one of the pods is a full service bar, right? And you can rent that. It takes it takes like 40 minutes to go through the rotation, so you can have a 40-minute power meeting, et cetera, on this Ferris wheel, right? So there are a bunch of them network that way. They're still partying, right? You're still seeing Vegas from that gigantic Ferris wheel. You're having a martini, whatever you want to have. But it never fails when you got 2 people that work in the same industry in a room together. There will be networking happening. There will be ideas tossed around. So you can marry the two. You can have fun, right? It's just literally brutal on the body because I'm in my 40s and I've got no sleep this whole week, man, none whatsoever. So it definitely takes a younger guy to do some of the things that some of these kids do. Right? So,
funny story. Gary's shop is, I don't know, 4 miles from my house. It's closer to my house than my store is. I met up with him this year. We talked and hung out a couple times. The last time I met up with him was last year at GAMA.
There you go. Right. And just as a little tidbit, next year will be the last year that the GAMA trade show is held here in Vegas. They're moving it to Reno. So that means I get to take a vacation instead of having running back and forth from the store and stuff like that. But so yeah, 2018 will be the last year in Vegas. They're moving it to Reno, a number of reasons, right? Vegas it's 1 in 10 people come to Vegas exclusively to attend the convention. That's the only reason they're here. And so GTS is kind of like a small fish in a very large pond, right? And they can negotiate much better deals in Reno. And supposedly the hotel is gorgeous, so I'm kind of looking forward to it, right?
Yeah, Reno's great. That just means it's going to be less expensive for everybody, which is awesome.
Yeah, the flights will be a little more expensive going into it, but the hotel in general will be less expensive, and also all the ancillary stuff, drinks and food and stuff like that. Vegas has gotten pretty pricey. I mean, unless you get off strip, but yeah, it's luxurious, but you pay a price for it. Say what?
Said they spent $150,000 on the meals that they provided for us this year, and they basically had to exclude half of the attendees from being able to attend these meals. So, I mean, just an idea of where all our money's going. It's going into all of the stupid little things that you have to provide that Vegas just rips us off on.
Well,
so we'll have a better experience by not having to spend that money on those things and being able to put it into creating a better conference.
And I don't want to badmouth Vegas. I mean, I live here, but realistically speaking, by the time you get the unions and all that good stuff, it gets stupid. I've held events here, and I'm talking about things like a room at the Venetian will cost, not a conference room at the Venetian, fairly large one, will cost you $10,000 a day, right? And those are all costs. Now, and to be fair to GTS, they didn't exclude us. It's basically you got meal tickets with your badge, right? You could purchase additional ones, but the problem is they've just run out of the ability to do it, because really the most of that meal is paid by the sponsors. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
By Wizards of the Coast, by whatchamacallit. And at a certain point in time, you just run out of meal tickets. It just happens. So, and
Well,
this
and
year was
that room couldn't have held much more of us anyway.
correct, yeah. And in this year was interesting because the Bally's remodeled their kitchen. So the kitchen for Bally's was shut down while this was going on. We were having everything trucked in from the Paris next door, right? So the food wasn't very warm. I mean, there are a number of issues, but you move on. Again, I'm not there for the food. I'm not there for the swag box. I just um, I'm there for networking and getting what I can to improve my business out of it.
So for me, my costs are probably a lot higher than some of the other stores because this year I really wanted to drive around and see the shops and stuff. So I'm here. I'm still in Vegas. The show ended Friday. The major stuff ended Thursday. So a lot of these shops were able to, they came in on Monday, they left on Thursday. I'm here through the weekend, which weekend rates at the hotel are a lot higher. I also have spent a couple $100s in cab fares getting around the city, checking out all the places and stuff. I'm going to be in this just over $2,000 for the trip, and that includes the hotel and the plane and all of the other little things. That does include the food that I've bought while I'm out here. When we go to these networking things, sometimes we end up at cheap places, sometimes not so much. You could do it for half that easily.
And for us, even though we are here, right? I mean, we have to double staff the store. There's people at the convention. There's people, excuse me, while I get Archimedes out of the shot here. So we do have still there's rising costs, right? I mean, you're staffing the store. We make it a point not to close the store at all. I mean, let's face it, I'm greedy, and I like the sales, right? But for some stores, they have to shut down the store. And that's a difficult debate, right? I mean, you are losing income. You are potentially putting your customers in the hands of a competitor for that week that you're gone, right? I mean, it runs Monday through Friday, but if you're one of those stores that has magic events just about every night or events every night, right? If you're not there and somebody else isn't there for you, those events are not happening. So there's those hidden costs. But for us, when it was a traveling show, when we were going to places like New Orleans, it really depended on where it was, right? Vegas is a lot cheaper to fly into and stuff like that. But I would say since we send each one of our employees, some more like our management staff is there more during seminars and in the trade floor, but we try to make sure that each one of our employees gets a chance on the trade floor. It lets them put a face behind the people that make the product. They do a lot of demos there too. So for me, could care less about the demo, right? I don't need that. I can learn the game when it shows up or by watching the video or whatever not. But for these guys, it's a great opportunity to do it with the manufacturer, maybe learn how to do a demo, right? So I'd say we easily cost the badges. Where about $1,500 to $2,000 is a ballpark, even though we're here, right? Of the badges, the extra payroll and things like that. It ends up being between $1,500 and $2,000, I'd say.
That sounds about right. I remember it being around 2000. Although we also saw some Cirque du Soleil shows too. So
right. And there's cost-cutting measures. I mean, if you're going with somebody else, right, you could share a room kind of situation. If you get somebody, if you're 4 miles from somebody else, they might decide that, hey, sure, we'll share a room. Not something I would recommend in general, but if you're trying to cut corners, by all means, you might find out that your neighbor though is extremely noisy sleeper.
I learned that this week.
Yeah.
So, and no, you can't crash at my house. I'll just tell you that in advance. Yeah, and that's a big reason for that swag box, right? I mean, you're getting a bunch of stuff free, and again, thank you publishers. They're the ones donating this stuff, right? If you sell that stuff, eventually you'll get your money back, and it balances out a little bit of what you're doing. To be, how much was it, Travis? They say it's going to be over 1,000, but did they put a hard number on it? I don't remember.
I don't think they did. And last year it was sent in 2 boxes. I only got one of the two, so I didn't even get the full swag box. And like you said, that's not the value. Yes, it's really nice, especially for those of us that are having travel to offset costs a little bit, but that's not the value of the show. It's a perk of the show. Um, and I think one of the perks we didn't go over though, I'm really energized. I'm really going, okay, when I get back, I'm changing this, I'm fixing that, I'm improving this, we're moving forward on that. And I did this with the Comics Pro too, which means I've got a full year and probably 2 years worth of improvements and changes and additions I want to do for my store. And I think that some, even older stores, the stores that have been doing this for a while, I think sometimes you just get into the routine so much
Yeah.
that you forget to have the energy and you forget to keep making improvements and changes. Because I've heard that from a couple of the stores that have been around forever that showed up this year and haven't been for a while. They're like, yeah, I got to go back. I got to improve these things, and I'm really excited. And that's definitely an advantage for older stores. Newer stores are figuring out how to do this. Older stores are being re-energized about doing it.
Yeah,
I
I
think
can
that's
definitely attest to that.
that's a great point, because I've definitely been through that. John, sounds like you do this for a while. After a while, you're like, what's the point? You lose that drive, and then I definitely remember the Gamma Trade Show inspiring me to go back and made me feel good about what I was doing, and gave me a bit more energy to do that for sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a grind, right? I mean, it definitely is. I mean, you do this 21 years for me, and it's not like it's not enjoyable, right? But anything that's done over and over again, after a while, you're like, you're right. What's the point, Wayne? I mean, where are we going? What are we doing, right? But at same token, like that game industry night, right? We put out a little bit of money. We have people over. We give them some food. But in general, it's good to get, because I'm very critical on my store. I always see the dust bunny that didn't get caught, or that board game that's not in the right section, right? But having people in the store and they're telling you, "Wow, I like how you do this," and "Hey, yeah, I'm gonna go back and copy this. Is that okay?" It sort of gives you that, like, "Oh, okay, maybe I'm doing some things wrong." And you touched on this to begin, right? There is a lot of reaffirmation of the things you're doing right. There will be some like, yeah, you're right, I'm doing this wrong, right? I mean, touching on that discounting, if you are a newer store, well, that's a great, I'm going to come into the market, I'm going to win because I'm going to be cheaper than everybody else. You're going to quickly learn that that's a great way to go out of business. So by all means, discount more, right? And so those are
Well, I
things
mean,
that you
if
learn
I
there,
could
right?
touch on that point, I think in order to come into the game discounting, you need a hell of a cash flow behind you. You have to have a lot of money. Like, you got to
Right.
go into this with hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're going to be a discounter.
But the lesson there is why. I mean, why are you going to put in all this time, effort, and energy? Give your life away because you're not moving into a career that's going to buy your fry. So you're right. If you want to make $1 million in this trade, you start with two. That I don't want to do that, right? And these are the kind of lessons learned over there, and a lot of it. If in case you start falling behind, and you go, well, so and so opened up 2 miles from me, I'm just going to start discounting. GTS is a is a good way to reinvigorate. And no, you know what? I'm probably going to clean the bathrooms. That's why people stop coming. Or I need to get a kick in the rear with my events. I need to do a board game league. I need to, these are all things that kind of put the fire behind your butt, and kind of make you go, well, okay, if he can do it, I can do it, and we can definitely, get a lot of energy off other people. And I'm going to go back to the struggling store. If you're that struggling store, if you have to close down for a week, close down for a week, but really try to make it, because it's especially when you're struggling, right? That's when you get in that horrible, horrible slump of like, man, nothing I do works, I suck, et cetera, right? It's easy to fall in that sort of depressive trap. I think you wrote an article on this, didn't you, Thomas, on the nihilism, right? It's hard. It's difficult. It is difficult. But when you have a team of people behind you pushing you forward, going, dude, you can do this, right? I looked at your store. I think you got good potential. You can do this, small minor tweaks, and then it actually turns into work, and then it turns into results. It's those results that really drive you forward. And the next year, there's a good possibility by the time you get to 11 months later, you're kind of like, man, I'm feeling that pressure again, and that GTS coming up kind of reinvigorates you. Uh, not a, not a GTS, but in general, yeah. And I really appreciate it. Like we were just so this is a rather brutal week. We just got off GTS, and then we're helping out with a convention, we're vending a convention called MeepleCon. It's happening Friday through this Sunday, right? So, I kind of went in yesterday, so I have no days off this week, but I went in yesterday to relieve one of the guys at the convention, and all the customers that were there just made it a point to talk to me for 5 minutes, right? Because we're seeing an explosion of stores, and everybody came up to me going, yeah, so and so opened up, but I really like your store because this, and this, right? So it does help. So yeah, if you guys really like a store, just let us know, because I don't know about everybody else, but I always see not the negatives, but like the things that can be fixed, right? So for me, it's an upward struggle of like, I'm not where I want to be. I will never be where I want to be, right? Because I'm always trying to improve. But every once in a while, good reinforcements from the customers, and yes, we do get it, so we appreciate it.
Yeah. I get a lot of feedback through emails. I just revised my website with a contact page it's like one of those self-filling forms where you just have to type in, what you want to say and send it, and automatically emails to me, which has actually increased the amount of emails I've been getting. Joining Google Plus, I've been getting tons of feedback like that. Not Yelp so much, but yeah, I think the majority of the feedback we get is online through emails or through customer reviews on places like Google Plus. And then once in a while, you do have someone that comes in the store and they say they love it. And like one of my favorite instances was this guy came in, he loved the store so much, he was a guy who made short films. This is what he did. He did promotional films for companies. And he's like, I want to make a film about your shop. I really like your shop. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then we set up a date, and he spent some time with me, a few hours filming. And a couple months later, he was like, here you go. Here's this little film I made about you and your store. And it was great. It was really professionally done. He didn't ask for any money or anything. He just wanted to do it out of his own passion for what he does. And I threw it up on my website. And because of that video, I'm getting new customers because they're seeing this video about my store and they're like, well, that's a cool looking store. I really like this store. And they're coming in and they're actually telling me that, yeah, I came in because of that video I saw. So that's probably my favorite example.
Yeah,
People
and
like
find out
what your place looks like, for sure. Sorry.
That was no, you're fine. That was another thing, like just literally. So the Friday tends to be sort of a ghost house in there, right, at GTS. But the nice thing about that ghost house syndrome is what ends up happening is the seminars tend to get like canceled because there's not enough people in the seminar. But what we all do is we all pile into one big room, and it's just a Q&A session, and there's a lot going on in that room during that time, right? So that's probably going to go away. They're going to push more seminars to Monday and eliminate Friday so we can get back to our stores and take care of the weekend, right? But as an idea of what happens there, the legal counsel for GAMA, for the Game Manufacturers Association, happened to be in the room. And I have now a point of contact that he's like, I can't be a lawyer, but I can put you in the right direction for when because I don't know these things. Like, hey, if I want to do employee stock options, where do I go, right? I mean, do I talk to my accountant? Do I talk to a lawyer? Which type of lawyer, right? And he's like, yeah, I can send you that information, right? And then it was just, he was in the room and he was talking about things with the Q&A, and it just happened to be that I'm like, hey, I need a lawyer, right? I need not so much we do have a lawyer for us, but he only handles business law, right? So he doesn't do a lot of the other things that sometimes we need to do. So,
and that's an area I probably feel a bit excluded from coming from Canada because your laws are different than ours.
Sure.
Unless they had some guest from Canada, but I don't think they would bring someone in for such a small market, because I think they are mostly businesses. These are mostly stores from the United States. Although I'm curious to know just how many international stores come to GAMA.
It's I think it's growing, and it's sort of not a growing. I won't call it concern, but something that they need to address because a lot of these programs, right? They present the ASMO play. Oh, not in Canada. Oh, just in the U.S., right? So I do hear that. Hey, when you're gonna get this? I'm seeing more than I have, and I don't know if like transportation's gotten cheaper or stores have gotten richer and they're able to come from further away. But there's also people from South America, for example, that I've run into. Some from Japan and Bangkok, I think. Yeah, there was Bangkok Cafe or something was there. So there is international, but you're right. I do feel there might be a certain point in time where GTS becomes like a global show, and things will have to change somewhat because it's definitely U.S. centric, right?
It is
in
very
what's being
much so.
presented.
There must be other GAMA trade show style conventions, like in the UK, for example. I would imagine.
Possibly,
There's a lot of people from Britain here, both the manufacturer and the retail side. I've met quite a few.
Right, and it should actually be pointed out that basically this is the only industry trade show, right? And there's only one, and it's this one. There was another tried a couple of years ago. They didn't do so well, and anyways, it was 1 year, and that was it. So there are, however, for those of you that can't travel, there are a lot of distributor open houses, which are starting to function in a lot of ways like a mini GTS. And both Origins and Gen Con are now having trade days, which usually happen a day or two before the actual convention. So think of them as they're not as big as GTS, right? But they are probably for some people easier to get to because if you go to the Alliance open house, it's in California, right? Well, they might be moving it, but if you go to ACD, it's in Wisconsin. So that, I don't know if that's closer to some people in Canada, for example. So there are alternatives. Just unfortunately, only one trade show at this point. And do I think the industry can support two right now? Probably not. I think distributors do a good job with the open houses to accommodate some of this other kind of overflow or people that are not able to travel such long distances or et cetera, et cetera. They don't. So there's a lot of debate going back and forth because the it's a value proposition. If my content is available online, well, great. So uh, the membership itself doesn't really pay for much. Does that make sense? Into the Game Manufacturers Association. So really, the show is a big driving force to get people to come to the show. So if you start putting all the seminars, all that stuff online, then why would you come to the show, right? And I've also argued like, look, I don't need a trade floor, right? I don't need all these beautiful booths. I'm just happy sitting in a room and conferencing with people, right? But the reality is that trade show, that trade floor, pays for a big bulk of the discounts on the hotel rooms, et cetera, right? So it's just kind of like Bally's is not just going to rent you a conference room. It's going to cost you $1 billion versus like having that huge space means that in general you can negotiate it a little bit better. But a lot of the funding for that comes from the publishers, and the value for them is to be able to network and talk to the retailers or to themselves, right? So if you take that away and it's just an online thing, then I would say the show would probably disintegrate. So, and for a while there, they were recording some of these shows, and now I can't remember what the name of that podcast was. I'll have to send it to you when I get it, Thomas, so you can put it in the footnotes if you want. But in that sort of sees now, there's some talk about putting like snippets of them as a teaser, right? Does that make sense? So people can see, oh wow, I really liked this 5 minutes of the presentation, and next year I want to go for the full hour. So sure, yeah. Right, yeah, and it's something that we can bring to the board and go. So, and it's interesting because there's also sort of how the bylaws are written. You can't do. So you are buying a membership within the Game Manufacturers Association, right? You happen to get the ticket to Origins and GTS is a perk of being a GAMA member, right? So they can't discount the entry into the show because you have to pay that membership and you're getting these. It's the way the bylaws are set up. Will they ever change that? I don't know. But it's more than just because one of the proposals is like, hey, it's amazing to me every year there's this huge gigantic line for people registering at the door, and in this day and age with the internet, right, I don't understand why that is. So one idea was, what if you offer a discount if you pre-register? And they can't do that. It's a membership into the organization, which is a set cost, and the perk is you get a free ticket to go to GTS. So
That one they just needed to let people know. Like I just pulled up the email they sent me on my cell phone and scanned my cell phone at the quick line. It took 3 seconds while everybody was standing there in line because I pre-registered on my phone as I walked up to it, scanned it, and grabbed my tickets. And it's just something that everybody had the technology to do, and nobody took the time to do.
And I'm gonna go with having talked to a couple of retailers over the years. The problem is we're also a very mixed bag, right? There are some retailers that still tell me, "Hey, I don't own a computer to run the store or whatever," and that's fine. I understand it. Or there was a gentleman in one of the seminars going, "Well, I don't have that information you're looking for, but email me and I will send it to you." That's what the presenter said, and the gentleman said, "Well, I don't have email," and I'm not sure how you operate your store that way, but there's mixed bags, and so I don't know. Probably, so that might be a good on-top market, the Amish country. You'll have wood games and.
There you go.
But that's also brings up another thing. When you come here and you get to see how other stores do it, when you do start falling behind, because really if you're not running with email, you're behind. And you get to see how much of a consequence that can be. You get to talk with other stores and you get to see how efficient and more productive and more, successful you get to be by embracing all these technologies. The big one that they pushed was point of sale system. So many stores are running without point of sale system. John, I went to one of your competitors who didn't even have a card swipe. He had just his cell phone that he's, typing in SKUs on his cell phone. It took him 15 minutes to check somebody out. And it's just like, what are you doing here? Like you have limited your number of customers that can actually purchase something from you to 6 an hour at most. And so being able to get to these conferences and seeing these people that are doing well, and you're like, well, what are you doing that I'm not? And if step one is, well, I have the computer that I can actually communicate with the 21st century with, or the big one, like I said, the point of sale system that tracks my inventory, that tells me how long the dead product's been on my shelf, that helps me place reorders, helps me determine if this is a product that I see moving all the time, but it's just because I'm the one pushing it, or if it's actually moving all the time and my employees are selling it too, what things should I be actually spending money to restock, and which things can I let go to make room for something better. And so you get to see just how much better all of this stuff is.
Well, and it's also a matter of education. A lot of people might think this is too expensive, but I mean, nowadays you can get a free Square reader, right? I mean, it's fine. If you're still going to use your phone, that's fine, but you can still use a Square reader, which is free, and just swipe that card. Don't type it by hand, So, yeah, we're different. We're all a little different, but there's a lot to be learned by, like, maybe this is not as hard as you think to implement. Maybe or it is important, right? It's something that is actually important to your business. You might not think about it, but there's a reason why person B didn't show up in your store. I mean, I'm pretty spoiled. I don't go anywhere where they don't take credit cards, right? I just don't. This whole cash only, I don't carry cash anymore. It's a lot easier at the end of the year to track everything through a credit card. So I there's a couple of donut shops here in town that are awesome. I don't go there because they don't take a card, right?
Well, and he was taking the card, but he didn't have barcode scanners, so he's typing in this thing. He's using the Square thing, but he's got to type in this 12-digit.
Oh, the actual
barcode.
SKU, the actual item itself. I understand. Okay, sorry.
That's interesting. I don't have a point of sale system, and that might be unusual for somebody that's been in business for 12 years, but I've always been wary of locking into a software that I would have to, like from our understanding, it's thousands of dollars to start, at least here in Canada, and then you have this monthly subscription and you're locked in, and like as long as you want to use the software, and you have to, if you want to keep using it for your store, you have to keep paying them. And I've always been a bit shy to committing to a company like that, because I don't like the idea of being locked in, and I've our store is kind of old school. We're brick and mortar. We don't do online sales. Our website is just all about us and the games we sell and the events that we run, most importantly. It sort of gives us a unique presence in the largest city in Canada, that we are old school brick and mortar. But yeah, I mean, I just use Excel spreadsheets for my inventory. I literally have sales binders where instead of scanning a code, we just flip to like the board game section and write the title of the board game. And then afterwards, I'll update my Excel inventory. And that's been working fine for me. And I'm having trouble seeing the benefits of going to a POS system, just because, I mean, the same errors I could make by doing this manually, they could be just as easily made with a POS system. And I think it would be harder to actually track the mistakes you make in the POS system, you know, by scanning a barcode twice by accident, by scanning something and then they didn't want it, so you have to put it back into your system, and and employees might forget or whatnot. Yeah, maybe I just need to take the dive. I don't know. I guess I just need to be convinced that POS system.
So two things. One,
Yeah.
Wayne, they actually had a track there on choosing a POS system, right? And two, anytime you want to talk about it, or actually, Thomas, maybe we should have one of these on POS systems. There's options. You don't have to go to subscription model. You can pay for a one-time kind of thing. Matter of fact, things like Square, you have free options. You have free. You're getting a free POS for using their services. That makes sense. So, but anyways, I think this would be an excellent topic. To do something on.
Mine was a one-time upfront cost, so I'm not locked in subscription, but it does so much for me. It probably saves me at this point about 5 hours a week, maybe 6 hours a week of my personal time, and that's not counting what things I'd have to move to an employee. So,
Yeah.
But anyways, back to GTS. It was they are, and it's something that we are actually, after talking to them, considering. We moved away from being just a single store a long time ago, and it is definitely, I wouldn't call it a weakness, but we're trying to simplify the method. Right now, you gotta have an employee do your buy list, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things the TCG player offers is a way to sort of do some aggregates and things like that, right? And then third-party selling. So works in a similar way that you would sell on eBay or on Amazon, right? Where you basically, what's interesting is they'll fulfill your order from their inventory, and then you ship them the cards to them, right? So instead of doing 500 shipments to 500 different people, you're putting all your stuff that you sold that week into a box and sending one shipment to them, because they've already filled it out of their inventory and you're replacing their inventory basically. So I don't know all the nitty gritty, but yeah, it was worth attending, definitely. Can you get that information off their website? Probably, I would guess so. Was a lot more entertaining to get the presentation there. Yeah, they did a really good professional job of presenting it, and they got me convinced to try it. So
free drinks.
the new bite. Personally, not that interested. I'm not. Again, I use it singles as a service, and I know Wayne's a lot more involved with singles, and a lot of the stores that make a living on singles, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We use it mostly as a service for our customers that want to trade in their magic cards to buy more magic cards or a board game or something like that. It's not a point of focus, so I probably won't use it much, but I would imagine it's a good source of singles for if you're moving a lot of singles to replenish your inventory, I would guess. I don't know.
They convinced me I want to look at getting enough volume to be TCG Direct, just so I can have that buy list and have another way to get singles in the store. Again, singles for me is the service to the customer in a lot of ways. My inventory is always short on all the big pieces, though, which means I'm not doing much good for anybody. So I might start moving a little bit more on TCG Player just so I can get the direct status, just so I can get the buy list and bring in more stuff.
So, and for those of you when we were talking about, the buy list is basically another acquisition method, right? You're able to basically purchase singles through TCG Player for your inventory in your store, basically. Correct. Yeah, they're FBA, right? Fulfillment by Amazon, fulfillment through TCG Player. So yeah, and it could be a boon for those. Like, I don't know, Travis, you're in Colorado. I forgot where exactly.
Greeley.
Okay, so I don't know the population, but like it could be a problem for stores that don't have a large Magic community bringing them cards to buy, right? It's kind of hard to do that, even if you're selling on eBay, if you don't have a way to acquire those cards, right? Short of you're busting open sets, I get that, but you're not going to bust open a legacy set, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah, we're under 100,000 people. So there's a limit to what comes in.
right. And Wayne, you're a Magic hub in your area, right?
Well, I mean, we're not. I guess we're one of the bigger players, but we're certainly not on the same scale as 401 Games or Face to Face Games, who are two titans in the city, and they're competing, a lot with each other, and they're buying their buy list prices are 60 to 75% cash for their cards right now, and I've sort of taken a step back and concentrated on the casual Magic community and market, because those two are just they're competing so much that it's not really worth me to fight to get in there in that market.
Understood.
So, yeah. And we don't rely on Magic at all. Like I think what gives us the most money right now is Warhammer 40K, because we trade in used Warhammer. I basically had this idea at one point where I'm like, why do we just trade in Magic cards? And so I started trading in board games, Warhammer. Anyways, the Warhammer 40K turned out to be a big hit, because people will trade it in cheap, which allows us to sell it cheap, and then people are coming in every week to see what's new in the bins, all the used stuff, and what can they buy half price used. And I guess I'm kind of going off topic a bit, getting into diversification, but yeah, it's not all about the Magic, though, for sure.
One of the seminars was all about product diversification. When my logistic manager said he got a lot out of it, right? I mean, you don't think about this, but when you go down to GTS, you hear that this guy's making, $50,000 to $70,000 on. They don't like it called frisbee golf, but I don't know what the official name of it is, right? We get it, and I'm sitting here going,
it's disc golf. It's just called disc golf.
Disc golf, right? I mean, right now with the store being 3,000 square feet, there's no way I'm sticking another line in the store. But when you move to the new store, it's like, okay, what do we fill it with, right? And these are all great ideas. Again, it's something that they look at, and you can get it through networking, you can get it through the seminar, right? But there's something unique about the way stores interact at GTS. We are all competitors, right? I mean, one way to, especially with the internet, theoretically, I can reach into Wayne's backyard and sell stuff there, right? Wayne's doing a good job, so I probably won't get a customer there. But when we get there, we're sort of a little more open. We talk about stuff, actual sales figures are still a big stickler point for people, and I sort of get it, right? I mean, I came from a store that was 300 square feet, and what I did there to what I do here are considerably different. So it can be soul crushing when you go, well, I make X and that person's making half of X, a quarter of X. But the reality in the end is it's quality of life, right? And that's what they discuss at GTS too, right? If you're pulling in 40,000 and you're putting in, you're happy, great. If you're pulling in 10 and you're happy, great. If you make $2 billion a year and you're unhappy, you need to change something, right? I mean, whatever you're doing that's making you all that money is making you miserable. So again, you get this by listening to people that go, yeah, I make this much, but I don't work. I'm in the Bahamas. The manager takes care of it, right? One day I'll get to that. But it's good to hear that there are some successful people. There are some people that are successful making far less than what you are making gross sales. And we're all different. There's all good ways to run these businesses. They're different, so cool.
That's a longer conversation than I think we want to get into, because there are so many stores that sell games, and we could argue about every iteration from is Target a game store to, is the clubhouse a game store, and why or why not on every one?
Yeah, I just touching on things. I usually differentiate between a store and a clubhouse. Those are usually my two big kind of start off right off the bat. Whether they're a game store or not, yeah, that's probably something we might want to get into detail about. But even like the definition between what's a clubhouse and whatnot, and so in general, I tend to frown upon clubhouses because a lot of them are not well maintained, and when the mundane steps into a clubhouse, they might get the wrong vibe and never step into a game store ever again, right? But back to that, like, what is your threshold? What do you want out of it? Some of these people, they just want a place to hang out and buy their stuff at wholesale, okay? Good for them, maybe not so good for the industry, right? But there's still an entity that exists within our industry, and we have to deal with it one way or the other kind of situation. So those guys definitely need to go to GTS. So as I'm gonna say, those guys are on my front. You need to go and get, so because it's a sort of fence sitting. Is this a job? Are you working, right? Or is this something that you do? I recently posted on the Facebook group a sign for a store that's open a total of 14 hours in a week, right? That, to me, that's not a store, right? But it exists. It's there, right? Maybe it's a person that has a full-time job or has inherited some crazy amount of money, and he's just there to receive the order so he can get his toys. And if there happens to be a customer, great, right? Those are the people I'd like to see attend GTS to kind of go, well, I need to get out or step up my game. One of those two things, you know. So.
I think that right off the bat, you're talking about a club versus a store. I mean, is it open to the public? If you have to pay a membership fee, that's not a game store. You should be open to the public. Anybody should be able to walk into your doors, be greeted warmly if you're really a friendly neighborhood local game store. You have to be accountable to your customers. Whether you have a game room or not, I think a game room, dedicated game space, definitely makes a local game store a better local game store. I think that means they're more invested in the community, and they become more of a destination. It's a game store. A game store without a game area. It's hard to even think of an example in Toronto of a game store without a game area that would be considered a local game store, a friendly local game store. So I do believe the game room, the dedicated game space, is an important. Might not be necessary, but it's certainly really important.
Sure. And one of the things that we talked a lot about the show with other retailers too was this idea of third space, right? People go to work, people go home, and then there's us. We're that third space. They're one of those three places eats up about 25% of their life. You know what I mean? So it's important. Yes. Is it mandatory? No, you're right. And there are some examples of stores that are just, look, I'm just here to sell you stuff. How is that different than, say, Target or Walmart? Because even Barnes & Noble is going to start doing some type of game demonstrations now. It's something that they're going to beta test, and we'll see where it goes. But I try to keep an open mind and understand that everybody's different. So when I'm talking to somebody at GTS, I'm curious to know, how does your store work, right? How does it work? How are you? Okay, great. So maybe there is a possibility of opening up a mall store that's 1,300 square feet, and all it's doing is it's got one little demo table, right? And and they're just putting out not my model, not how I would want to do it. But maybe if I want to open up a second store, that's what it looks like. You know what I mean? I have an event center. Do I need another event center, across the city? So, but again, these are things that tend to be just like we're doing here, tend to be discussed at length at GTS and inside and outside of the seminar rooms, right?
And I wonder what product mix you can or should have to be still a game store. I brought up Target. Target sells games. It's what, 2% of their business, 1% of their business. I see though some comic stores. There are comics and collectibles with a little bit of games, and games may make up 20% of what they do. but the rest of their product is related. So is that a game store? I mean, obviously it's a comic and game store if it's a game store, but is it a comic store with games, or is it a comic and game store? And that's a question that obviously it's going to be a personal definition for everybody, but I see some stores getting away from games in ways that when I hear them talk on the forums, I go, you're not a game store.
Mm-hmm.
You used to be a game store. You're still a retail store. You still have a game space and you still carry games, but your business model and what you're focusing on and your product mix is not a game store. It
Sure.
is a whatever other store. And so somewhere in my mind, they've switched over, and somewhere in their mind, they have not.
Right.
So,
And that might be more importantly in the customer's mind. If I get this a lot, so we just do games, right? No disrespect to the comic book stores. Matter of fact, one of the talks of at GTS this year was to perhaps incorporate more comic people into this, because there's a lot of hybrid stores now. They do comics and they do games. Nothing wrong with it, but to me, I am a game store. You're not going to find comics. So when somebody stumbles into my store and is looking for comics, what do you mean you don't do comics? I don't. But I don't want to give the impression that I do comics. If you stumbled in my store is one thing. If you came to my store, it's because specifically something I said or some advertisement I did makes you think that I'm a comic book store. I failed at my job and I've disappointed a customer. So that might be a challenge for these stores who think they're a game store but are truly not, because we do get customers come in. I come to you because you're a game store. I go to so-and-so because they're a comic store, and I never buy my games there because there's like a shelf this big, and that's it. So yeah, I can see where that's a problem, but I think the problem really lies with if you're deceiving your customers, not intentionally, but you're deceiving them. You're doing yourself a disservice. If you call yourself a comic store, great, awesome, because you're doing comics. Comics and games I see a lot. You know what I mean? But if you start going, I'm a game store, and you have a box of Magic on the shelf, yeah, that's probably not going to do you a lot of good.
my Uber driver thought, maybe magic tricks, pull a rabbit out of a hat,
Yep, we get a lot of that. The new store is going to have a shelf of the other Magic, because I hate to disappoint the kids. Come in here and they're all like, oh, Mom drove me down to get a rabbit in the hat trick. And I'm like, and I don't do those tricks. I'm sorry. And then their soul is crushed and they walk out. So we're going to have starter Magic sets, not because I want to, but because, yes, Little Shop of Magic here in Vegas, a lot of people think that I sell magic tricks. That happens a lot, yeah.
Yeah, a lot.
And that's
yeah,
another
all the time.
hybrid store that pops up a lot, and I've seen several of them in Vegas where it's board games and video games. So,
believe it or not, I know at least one store here in town that drives the singles primarily as a way to get used video games, because that's really his moneymaker, right? But for him, hey, if I can give you this Magic card instead of giving you cash for those boxes of video games you're gonna give me, awesome. You know what I mean? So, and he is a game store. I mean, he is a game store. He's just, how much is he our type of game and how much is he video game? I would say that's open to debate, but it's still a game store, right? I mean, and matter of fact, every year here we have an award for best game store, and it's always video games, right? Nobody for the local newspaper puts it on, and you never see one of our stores. People don't think in that term when they think game store, I guess. So.
Yeah, it's not quite mainstream enough. And if any kind of game store gets recognition, it's probably going to be a board game cafe, which again, is that really a game store?
It depends, right? Is your model really, the games are there to drive your coffee sales? Because that is a model, by all means, right? Mm-hmm. The games are just a reason for you to stick around and buy an extra cup of coffee, right? And you can see a different attitude, right? It's like in busy times, we might ask you to wrap up your game and leave. They're interested in getting another table to sell coffee. You're not buying enough coffee, right? And that makes sense to me. And for me, the addition of coffee is going to be, my customers are in here day in and day out. They want to drink something. So great, awesome. If they want to have something good to drink, I don't want to send them somewhere else. It's here, so.
One thing that we're talking about, what makes all of these stores game stores or not, none of these models are bad. I mean, okay, maybe the Clubhouse model has more down thing up, but if you're a coffee shop that happens to have games, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different from what we're all doing.
Right. Yeah, and then the lines, as we become a little more mainstream, right? geekish chic right now. The lines are blurring. We During one of the seminars at GTS, there was a gentleman who has basically for 18 years managed Barnes and Noble stores. Right. I'm not sure why he was there. He said he wasn't in Barnes and Noble anymore, but there was a rather interesting discussion between what Barnes and Noble is trying to do. They simply do not have the space to dedicate to games like we do, right? I mean, and I know we think like, oh, they're huge, but their inventory is books. And even when you go in there, even in the stores that are making the Barnes and Noble stores are making a big push into games, it's mostly, if you look at it, concentrate towards their educational games, the younger games kind of situation, you know what I mean? The 6 to 8 year old. Um, so from their perspective, it's a matter of like, how do we stay relevant in this age of Amazon? Because the book market has been taking beatings, right? And they're exploring possible things. They are basically trying to get somewhere near where we are because we stay relevant regardless of internet or not. You offer things that you can. The internet is for the most part, again, I do sales in both channels. I don't want to diss on my internet um, co-worker, sorry, fellow retailers, right? But it's mostly parasitical, right? I mean, you have an established person and you're selling to that person. You can put on a convention, you can sponsor things, but realistically speaking, what's driving the new recruitment is the brick and mortar stores, and we do it through these services that you cannot really do anywhere else, and we do it in such unique ways, all of us, right? It could be because you're a coffee house selling coffee and you have board games and all of a sudden people start getting interested. It could be that you are, offering a system for people to trade in their 40K that they don't want. It all works and hopefully it works well without, stepping under people's toes, and it creates this ecosystem that creates customers and keeps us all alive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's another type of game club too we didn't really touch upon, and these are the officially sanctioned clubs that you see in universities. I know the University of Toronto has a huge Magic club, and that actually directly impacted my store. I lost customers because they were
Sure.
like getting product at cost, and they were running their own events, and but that's probably overall, like you were saying, good for the overall economy that they have this community right there at the university, which is a great recruitment kind of area, and they're probably bringing in more Magic players because of it. And hopefully
It's
they
kind of
branch off
interesting.
to look for their local game store, their friendly local game store, and hopefully they find doing grounds. But yeah.
Well, that's kind of interesting because here in the United States, actually, both Wizards and like GW tend to send the clubs to us. They go partner with a store, see what you can work out with a
Oh, okay.
store.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they go, I get that a lot. It's like, hey, I want to start a game club. All right, yeah, we can get you a bit of a discount for your starting kind of like board games that you need for your club and things like that. And it's always, you got to be careful because some of this, you want to start a game store, sorry, a board game club or a Magic club. I get a lot of that maybe the intent is there, but then it never really finalizes, right? So I'm not going to really be engaging with all these people, but a couple that have done it, it's been successful and it's worked out for us. So I don't know if things work different in Canada as far as Wizards, but I'd be surprised if they didn't like go, well, have you talked to Dueling Grounds? See if you can do something with them. So
Yeah, no, as far as I understand. Hmm?
It brings up something interesting though. This was not the only business I looked at opening. When I looked at opening business, I actually looked at a couple of things. I looked at a clothing store a little bit. I've had a jewelry business before. There's not a big barrier to entry, and none of these distributors really provide any. Some of the industries that I looked at, you had to have a business plan that said X, or you had to already be in business where you were doing X amount of dollars a year before you could bring in their product. And you had to meet these requirements as far as, what you were, how you were set up. Your retail space had to meet so many requirements. And in our industry, the most stringent requirements to set up an account is usually take a picture of your cash wrap, take a picture of the front of your store, and as long as both of those things exist, you're good to go. and that's the most stringent. Some of them are like, yeah, send us an email. We'll get you a wholesale account. Sounds good. Um, I was even required to show EINs and sales tax licenses to some of the accounts that I've set up and some of the places that I've got set up, because all they cared about was I willing to give them money? And it didn't even have to be was I willing to give them lots of money. It was I willing to give them $100 a year? Sweet, here's your wholesale account. And it allows for this clubhouse, both the university club to get wholesale product, but these little places that don't have a business plan, that don't understand what they're doing. And I think the reason a lot of these other industries have much more strict requirements is so that they don't have this duality that we have, where somebody walks into the clubhouse and goes, oh, this is, I'm not going to a game store ever again. This wasn't very pleasant. And then we've lost people out of the industry as potential customers that could have been converted into somebody that had fun playing these games and had a professional experience. And it's actually fairly systematic how little barrier to entry there is in a lot of ways.
Sure, and that is to a certain extent changing. Again, not to harken back, but it is something that gets discussed a lot at GTS, right? What makes a game store? Who is allowed in GTS? Back to my sticking point of like, why are my customers here? When I see an end user, right, like an actual player versus store owner wearing some store owner's badge, it's very disruptive to what we're doing there, which is trying to make our industry better, right? So it is changing. One of the big things right now is this Asmodee North America. And for those of you who don't know, Asmodee North America is sort of this new organization. It was founded as a merger between Days of Wonder, Fantasy Flight Games, and Asmodee from Europe, into this big giant conglomerate. They just picked up Catan. They have Star Wars, right? So it's huge. But they've now reduced the number of distributors down to 5. From the original 20 plus that they had. They've done this in an attempt to try to curb some of this behavior, because there's what you said, which is like, you can sign up, you don't even need to, some of them don't even require a business license or a picture, just like, yeah, sure, okay, I'll sell you a product. But the other problem is some of the distributors have back doors to the internet. So you're a distributor, you're getting better pricing, and you happen to have a website under a different name that sells at massive discounts, right? So there are steps that are being done. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And it's not that I want to stop people from entering this. I want people to enter this after careful thought and consideration of going, this is what I want to do to make a living. And in order to do that, I need to present myself in a certain way. And I need to do things in a certain way that is, A, not toxic to the community, B, not toxic to the other stores around me, and C, not toxic to the industry as a whole, right? Because if you are toxic to that industry, it won't be around in 20 years. And I've been doing it for 21 years. I'd like to do it for another 20 years, and then hopefully I'll retire. We'll see what happens. But you get what I'm getting at? It's kind of like low barrier to entry right now is a big sticking point for the industry. And it's something that is changing, and hopefully it changes faster because there's more and more stores coming on board. It's great. It's awesome. There's a store in every neighborhood. The problem with that is if they're not good stores, they're not going to survive very long. And what the damage they do while they go out is really, really bad. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you shouldn't be going into this thinking it's like a hobby. This is definitely a lot of hard work in a career.
Or because Wayne makes $1 million and Travis is driving in a limo, you're going to be able to do the same thing, right? I mean, it's tough, guys. It's tough. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, but it is hard work. And on top of that, it's no longer your hobby, right? It's something that you have to do.
Yeah.
And back to that grind, right?
You will play less games when you open a game store. That's the first hard reality I came across. But going back to the limiting the distributors, saying the Asmodee merger brought it from 20 distributors to 5 or whatever.
Don't quote me on 20, but it was some number. I mean, yeah.
I get it, but it's this whole idea. There's more and more game companies that are going exclusive with distributors, which I personally don't like. I like to be able to buy Settlers of Catan, for example, from a number of different locations. Because if you don't have more than one source for something, when that source is gone, then you're out of luck. When you have multiple distributors, you can put in multiple orders and say if they're short shipped, you order 10, you can only get 5, which happens a lot with one of our distributors that has a lot of exclusive stuff. Like Lion Rampant here in Hamilton, close to Toronto, they're exclusive with Fantasy Flight. So when the new Star Wars X-Wing ships come out, I put in my order.
Sorry, guys.
I get short shipped because there's so many other stores trying to order, and this is the only place to get them, and they're just not able to meet the needs of everybody. So there's certainly.
John, you've got someone knocking at your door.
Okay. Excuse me for 1 second, guys. I'll be right back.
Oh, you can see John? You can see his store?
I'm in his shop right now.
Oh,
we're both at the same place right now.
Video, so okay. Yeah. So yeah. I definitely have a problem with this exclusive distribution stuff, just because it does make it harder to get things, and when things run out, then there's no distributor C, D, E, and F you can try.
Well, exclusive is bad. The comic industry has to deal with that. We are limited to Diamond, who is owned by the same company that owns Alliance. And to see how much better Alliance is than Diamond, it's clearly not just the company. It's when we have issues, we don't get to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Exclusive to one, if it's a king-making decision, is problematic. But having limited number of distribution channels instead of 1,000, having just a few, and I've heard that Canada has fewer choices for most of these things anyway. Yeah. So Absolutely. If they get cut out a number, then it causes issues. But there are some distributors that cause more issues than they help. They contribute to this clubhouse mentality. They make things about, I don't know, they hold back good product so that they can allocate it later, so that they can make you jump through hoops. They backdoor it to the internet. If it's really hot, why even sell it to the stores? It's selling for over MSRP online. We're going to add to the scarcity by not giving it to the stores and putting it out on the internet directly ourselves and stuff. And you can't police that when there's too many distributors. So you've got to cut back the number of distributors to something that you can police, because these bigger companies do want to protect their value, and they do want to protect the stores. We talked about how this industry, we do work together a lot through things like GTS and the GAMA organization. They can't protect us if it's going through too many channels.
And it's definitely a situation for you in Canada, Wayne, because here actually a lot of the exclusives with Alliance, which I'm very vocal about exclusives. I agree with you. I have a lot of accounts with a lot of different distributors, because when product runs out, I need to be able to source it for as many. I've gone to the extent of literally going to Target when they had something so I can sell it to my customers and buy them out. Okay, I don't care. I mean, my customer is king. I will get it for them. But here we're seeing the opposite. They are actually disintegrating a lot of those exclusives because they weren't really doing what they were supposed to do, which was like, try to help mitigate that. Now, I will give Asmodee credit for this, Fantasy Flight Games and Days of Wonder. And I was very vocal when Days of Wonder was one of the first ones to go exclusive through Alliance against it. But what they've done is at least given us a choice of 5 distributors versus going thou shall order only from Alliance, right? Or distributor B, C, which I think is really detrimental. I mean, would you imagine what would happen if we just went, Travis is the only one that can sell X-Wing. Travis can now sell it at whatever price he wants. If he doesn't like the way you smell, he will not sell to you. If Travis likes somebody else better than you, that person will get more X-Wing than you, right? So, and to be fair, Alliance has really stepped up their games. They were the king of this of exclusives. They're going away from them, so they're much better distributor now than when they were to begin with these exclusives. But yes, some kind of curbing needs to happen because Travis is right. There are some distributors that unfortunately don't play fair, don't play by the rules, and they really ruin things for all of us, everybody, themselves included in the long run. But you know. And I don't mean to be rude, but I don't have much more time, guys. So I'm gonna have. Yes, and I'm gonna do one more. Well, right.
Well, I think
GAMA
I'm
is the
going to go back.
organization. Yeah, GAMA is the organization. GTS is the trade show. GAMA trade show, right? But so you join GAMA, you get the tickets to Origins in case you want to go there too, and GTS. But if you're thinking about it, I believe they still have this. You can go in the first year without having a game store, and that's your prospective game store. You go there to learn and figure out if it's something you're going to do. I think it's a reduced price. I'm not 100% sure on that. You'll find information on their website. But the flip side of that, if you've been doing this, if you're struggling, definitely need to go. If you're set in your ways and you're doing great, I would say it's still a good thing to go because you will learn something that's going to make you more money. It's going to, at the bare minimum, re-energize you, and it's definitely worth it. And Wayne, hopefully I see you there next year, or maybe we meet in Reno in 2018.
I'm definitely interested in going again just because of our conversation. And also, I'd just like to reiterate the point you made earlier, John, that I think is really important. And I hadn't really thought of it like this either, but your local distributors will have open houses, and they act as like little mini GTSs. And I was going to a local distributor for their open house. But every time I'd go, I'd spend way too much money, and so I kind of shied away from it. But I think if I approach it in a way that you were describing, like as if it's a GTS, and try and get stuff out of it that way instead of focusing on oh, this is my distributor, I'm supposed to buy stuff, because I know that's what they want. They're holding the open house because they want you to buy stuff. But if you can just hold that in check and just go there for, concentrate more on the networking and talking to the company reps that come in from Paizo and Fantasy Flight, etc. I think that I'd get more out of it. So yeah, that was a good point.
We need to use every tool that we can to run better stores. Unless we don't want a better store for whatever reason, which I can't imagine not wanting to make a better store, but you got to use the tools. And this is a big tool. It's an expensive tool. It's a difficult tool. I know there are a lot of shops that do it every few years or whatnot because the cost to return ratio for them isn't worth showing up every single year. But it's definitely a tool that should be in everybody's arsenal. We have this chance to meet each other, to exchange ideas, to meet publishers, to express our concerns, to give them feedback, to get feedback from them, hear their concerns about what we're doing, and make the industry, our stores, and everything in between better.
All right, guys, I just want to thank you for watching this episode of the Manaverse Podcast, the first video episode. I also want to thank John, Travis, and Wayne for coming on the show and sharing their insights with us. If you have any burning questions about running a game store, feel free to ask us. And send it to me on Twitter, @TomTraplin, email tom@manaversesaga.com, or reach out to John, Travis, or Wayne. Either of them would be more than happy to answer any of those questions. And if you pick a good one, if you have a good question, maybe it'll be a topic on one of our upcoming shows. So, yeah, thanks for checking out the show. And as always, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.